Another piece, and this is a hard piece, and I'm going to say it, and it could be quite controversial, but this is a hard piece to discuss.
Welcome to Fìadh's Focus, Voices Leading Change.
All right, good morning. Today, actually, I'm going to be chatting about accessing the curriculum. We had one of our whānau feature on the news the other day in relation to their daughter and accessing support for her to come in with a support worker to access the curriculum. So Fìadh is a really cool story in terms of how much inspiration she provides for us, and a lot of the work that we see our teams do is really inspirational too, and it shows the power of the impact of an ecosystem of support around Fìadh that allows her to access what she's entitled to, which is accessing all parts of the curriculum to the best of her abilities, with support from her care worker, with support from her, obviously her whānau, and of us in the centre. It's actually a topic I'm quite passionate about. Following on from my kōrero about ADHD, the ability for the educator to allow children to access the curriculum is critical. The ability to allow the child to access the curriculum through the teacher also comes with the ability of experience. I gave my experience of having an ADHD child in my first year of teaching. Now, how I dealt with a child with ADHD in my first year of teaching versus how I dealt with a child in my 5th and then my 10th year of teaching was vastly different based on my experiences and understandings of how to actually build a situation that allows them to access the curriculum. A few things that I've got to talk to in that sense. The first thing is that in my first year of teaching, it was clear to me that my tertiary space, my tertiary education at university had not really equipped me at all to deal with the needs, the diverse needs that were actually going to exist in my classroom. I only really experienced those in a small basis on my practicums, and in those scenarios too, there was a lot more support because I was working under a teacher essentially, so I wasn't taking the strain of having to make sure that I'm building models that allow this child or these children to access the curriculum. That's a really important point. The second point is, within the 5 years kind of from 2004 when I started into the teens, the access of information that came out around working with children with autism, working with children with ADHD, Asperger's on that spectrum, or everything like that, the level of information really rapidly grew. And obviously things like the internet and things really started to be ingrained in what we could access. So our experiences grew rapidly because the information was made more available to us. Going forward into 2023, 2024, we obviously realised that there's a huge amount of information, as well as a whole range of other things, which I'll talk to in a second, that allow us to deal better in providing access for these children to the curriculum. One major part is that a lot of young teachers that are coming out of schools today, that are coming out of primary and secondary schools, they're going into studying and they're working in the fields where they are going to be working with children, and those, whether it be nursing, teaching obviously is a good one in those realms. They have probably most likely gone to school with children with these additional needs. They have probably been a major part of helping these children access the curriculum as well. A good example of this, yesterday when I was with Fìadh and her mum, it was crazy to see the community kids all walking in. Hi Fìadh, hi, how are you? They came and helped. They know Fìadh, Fìadh knew them, and there was this community of kids around her. That is actually what we're seeing with the new graduates coming through. Their experiences with children with additional needs or with differing needs, they are actually being exposed to that right through their formative years, which actually allows them to see a lot of normality in the child, in the person, and allows them to really bring them into being part of the community, which is quite a powerful thing. I don't remember me personally as an ADHD child. I was probably just naughty, I guess, labelled naughty, versus having a neurological difference compared to my peers. I still want to say though, I don't believe that the current models of tertiary education are equipping our young teachers or our graduates to come through and be prepared to be able to support that access, and that is still on us to provide that support for them. So what it really means for us in this space around access in the curriculum is we have to work hard with our leadership team to understand the differing needs that every child brings and the uniqueness that it brings in terms of how what they bring to the kete and to the table, and B, what we need to do to meet them in that space of allowing access. That means having really strong relationships with their whānau. It means having really strong relationships with the ministry. It means having really strong relationships with any other support workers or any other pieces in that ecosystem. And it means really trying to upskill your community on who is out there and what their needs are and their rights are when it comes to accessing the curriculum. We have to work really hard on continually supporting our teachers. That's a big one. I think the desire for us to continue to support our teachers in spaces that allow them to, again, pose some questions and say, hey, this is how I dealt with the situation with this child who is on the spectrum, or who has ADHD, or who has a differing need. This is what I did. Was the result. What's the discrepancy? How do we start closing that gap so that we have a higher probability of success? Those questions and those conversations are really important, and it's something that I love actually seeing in action. It's something that I love seeing our leaders do, is going in and sitting down with our people, and actually I love doing it too, going in and sitting down with our people and saying, hey, this is what you did, this was the result, what's your thoughts? And it allows our teachers to digest their actions. It allows our teachers to feel confident that they're making headway into making sure that we are giving access to the curriculum for all the differing learning needs. Another piece, and this is a hard piece, and I'm going to say it, and it could be quite controversial, but this is a hard piece to discuss. We somehow need to continue to really educate our community on the differing needs. Now, I'll use myself as an example because I'm not worried about what people think about me in this space. I was difficult, and in some aspects, I still am. I was difficult as a child in many ways, in that I was so hyperactive in spaces, and the energy that I carried into things was troublesome, and I often flipped out. I would get so angry that I'd be crying. I'd get so worked up and wound up in things in my own actions, especially if I felt like I had to defend myself. I would get so wound up in that space that I would often lash out, and this was often me as a kid. It actually proved to be quite a hindrance in my life as a teenager and going into my early 20s as well, and probably mid-20s, where that ability to really manage, or I want to say regulate, those behaviours was very, very hard. And actually, from an outsider looking in, it just looks like an angry kid, or it just looks like a kid or a person that can't cope, or it just looks like a person that's got issues, when actually the reality is it's a neurological piece that makes our brain fire in certain ways that people actually who don't have the neurological difference, they don't understand. And the real key to a lot of this is helping our community stay curious around this. Curiosity is the precursor to empathy. You cannot be empathetic about something if you're not curious about it. And when we have children, especially in our age groups, when they are young and they are, lashing out, or they are getting upset, or they are, throwing things, or they're yelling and screaming, things like that, we've got to step back as adults and say, hey, I wonder if this child has differing needs to accessing the curriculum. I wonder if this child actually has support pieces in play. I wonder if this child is carrying levels of trauma that we don't know nor understand, and we can't allow that child, it doesn't allow that child to really access the curriculum to the full extent. Those questions, those curious stances are important for our communities to understand, because we have been told 1 in 4 children that are coming through our doors have additional needs. 1 in 4. That really requires a high level of curiosity combined with a high level of empathy to help our children in these spaces access what they are entitled to, which is equality of experience, equality of opportunity, and equality of teaching standard. That's a really big piece for me. So how do we help our community? A, this podcast and what we're doing in this space is going to continue to shed light on some of these things. B, we have the bravery of people like Takia. You can go back and look at Takia's podcast talking about Thea. You can go back and look at Gala's podcast talking about Thea. We have these people. We even had Kelly talking about her family and what that looked like in that sense, and things like that. She gave some of her stories around the anxieties and things like that. This podcast is going to continue to push out all the grey and continue to add value and understanding into what will eventually be a massive resource for families in the future to come in and know and understand what it is we actually do. We have to continue to provide information through blogs, through our social media engagement, through our newsletter and things that allows us to continually evolve our understanding and knowledge of these differing needs that these children have. It's a massive undertaking from some of our families, but what I must stress is that if you feel that there is something going on in this space with children, start looking at it yourself, start educating yourself. Go and watch, talking about ADHD, the book Scattered Minds by Gabo Mate is one of the best books you'll ever read when understanding ADHD. It will give you deep insight into the structures and the neuroscience that go on in the mind of an ADHD person. It is a huge resource, and it will allow you to grow greater understanding in that space. What we must continue to do is feed our own curiosity to understand that we cannot compare apples with apples when it comes to the diverse needs of children and also accessing the curriculum. The last thing that we're going to continue to do, and we're always making a commitment to this, is we are going to continue to work hard with our teaching team. We cannot expect them to cope with things that are way outside of their realms of scope and understanding. That means we have to commit to working hard on growing leaders that are empathetic and want to come in and look at it from an understanding lens, that they're going to seek to understand that Stephen Covey principle of highly effective people, seek to understand before being understood. Going out knowing, why did they make that decision? How did you arrive at the decision? What can we do to make sure the decision has a higher probability of success the next time? What resources do you need? Who do we need to get in? What needs to come around to help you as an educator continue to grow and evolve? That's probably a major piece for us, and that's the responsibility that we're taking in that space to continue to allow children to access the curriculum. To finish off, accessing the curriculum for every child within our country is their right. It is entirely their right. It is our responsibility as educators to ensure that we can continue to increase the probability of success for that child when accessing the curriculum. Now, what accessing the curriculum looks like for each individual child is different, but we must remove all roadblocks, we must remove all barriers to accessing the curriculum, and if that comes from, again, putting out information, again, growing people's understanding, again, getting in experts, again, pooling resources and going to courses and things like that so that those children get to access the curriculum, then that is what we will continue to do. It's a major challenge, but it is the challenge that I know that we are up for, and that many early learning centres are up for. So if you really want to help in that space and help us understand, help us build capacity in that space, come in, talk to us, ask questions, see if there are ways that maybe you could help, because I guarantee you'll feel way better about the scenario that your children are in as well. And as a community, as an ecosystem wrapping around children is the best way to be for our future progress. Up the waz.